The ad was simple, written in a hard, practical hand and pinned outside the general store where dust gathered like old secrets. Farm maid wanted. Cooking, cleaning, tending animals. No nonsense. No talk of marriage. Caleb Warren meant every word. After losing his wife to fever 3 winters earlier, his ranch had turned quiet in a way that scraped the inside of his chest. He didn't want pity, didn't want another woman trying to fill a space he still couldn't look at directly. He just needed help, someone who would work, keep to herself and leave his heart alone. When the woman arrived, he almost sent her away without a word. She stood small but straight, dark hair braided tightly down her back, eyes steady as stone. She was Apache, wrapped in a plain shawl, dust on her boots from miles of walking. She didn't speak when he greeted her. Instead, she lifted her hand and made signs he didn't understand. The storekeeper leaned in and whispered that she was deaf, known among the nearby tribes as a liar. Caleb frowned. A deaf farm maid was trouble. Communication mattered on a ranch, where animals could kill you, and storms could swallow you whole. He shook his head, already turning away, when she reached into her satchel and pulled out a folded paper. On it were careful drawings, hands milking a cow, sweeping a floor, cooking over a fire. At the bottom, a single word written in rough English, work. Something in that word stopped him. Not pleading, not hope, just fact. Against his better judgment, he nodded once. The first weeks were awkward and silent in ways Caleb hadn't known were possible. Aliyah moved through the ranch like a shadow that worked miracles. Meals appeared hot and hearty. Animals were calm. The house smelled clean again. She communicated through gestures, expressions, and small notes left on the table. Caleb found himself watching her more than he meant to, noticing how she listened with her whole body, how she felt vibrations through the floor when horses approached, how she smiled with restraint, as if joy were something to be spent carefully. The hands at the neighboring ranch warned him. Apache blood brought trouble, they said. Deafness was a curse. Caleb ignored them, though unease followed him like a stray dog. One night, a storm tore through the valley, lightning splitting the sky. A fence broke and the horses panicked. Caleb ran into the rain, shouting warnings Aliyah couldn't hear. He found her already there, hands on a trembling mare, calming it with steady pressure and eye contact, reading fear without sound. When a beam snapped loose from the barn roof, it was Aliyah who shoved him clear, taking the blow to her shoulder. As he bound her injury later, hands shaking, she met his eyes and placed her unhurt hand over his heart, feeling it race. In that moment, something cracked open in him, respect first, then something deeper and more dangerous. He had asked for a maid, not a miracle, not a woman who could step into silence and still hear him better than anyone ever had. Aliyah healed slowly, refusing rest, insisting through signs and stubborn action that work was how she stayed whole. Caleb tried to order her to slow down, then realized how foolish it was to bark commands at someone who couldn't hear them. Instead, he learned. He learned signs from an old book the preacher owned, learned to watch her hands, her eyes, the way her breath changed when something was wrong. The ranch changed with them. Silence became a shared language rather than a wall. Evenings were spent at the table, candlelight flickering as Caleb traced words on paper and Aliyah corrected his clumsy signs with patient amusement. Through these fragments, her story emerged. Her family had been taken, scattered by soldiers. Her deafness had saved her once. She hadn't heard the gunfire until it was too late, but she had felt the ground tremble and run. People saw her as broken. Employers dismissed her. Tribes pitied her. She had learned to survive without expecting kindness. Caleb listened with a weight in his chest that felt like guilt for a history he hadn't made but had benefited from. Trouble came, as it always does when peace feels earned. A group of men rode in one afternoon, claiming Aliyah was trespassing on land meant to be cleared of savages. Caleb stood between them and his porch, rifle in hand. But it was Aliyah who stepped forward, lifted her chin and signed fiercely. They laughed at her silence. That laughter ended when Caleb spoke, not with threats, but with a calm certainty that this land was hers as much as his, that anyone who wanted her would have to go through him and the law in town. After they left, Aliyah touched his face gently, a question in her eyes. He answered by taking her hand and placing it over the scar on his chest, the one left by grief. Weeks later, illness struck him, fever, delirium. In his half-conscious state, he felt hands cooling his skin, steady pressure grounding him. Aliyah never left his side. She read his lips, felt his tremors, slept on the floor near his bed to sense his movements. When he woke fully, alive because of her, the truth settled between them without words. He had never hired a wife, but he had found a partner. Love arrived quietly, built from care, from choosing each other daily. When spring came, Caleb rewrote the ad and tore it down before anyone could read it. The ranch no longer needed a maid. It had found its heart. And in the wide, listening silence of the plains, a cowboy and a deaf Apache woman proved that some of the strongest bonds are forged where words are not, required only presence, courage, and the willingness to stay.